How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be talking about my 2024 Yamaha YZ250X. I debated on whether or not I should even make this video, considering there's a lot of review videos out there about this bike, but I don't feel like that they talk about some of the things I was wondering when I was on the market for this kind of bike. So hopefully in this video, it answers the not so typical questions if you're in the market for a new bike. So let's dive right in. So I come from a motocross background. I've been riding motocross my whole life. And so I race motocross, I race sprint enduro. So the bikes that I have are two Kawasaki KX250Fs. One's a 2013, one's a 2023. Why that's important is because I was in the market for a bike to ride with my wife. My wife doesn't ride, she does ride motocross, but she doesn't like motocross at the same capacity that I like motocross. So in general, when we ride together, we're mostly riding like a sprint enduro / cross country track or hard enduro. Hard enduro is her favorite type of riding. The more technical, slow, tight trails it is, the more she likes it. So I really wanted to get a bike that I could ride with her that I felt could do that kind of riding with her, as well as ride on a track or race sprint enduro or GNCC. I needed something that could go fast and go really slow. And my Kawasaki's, especially the KX versions, they don't do that. Four-stroke race bikes in general don't do well in hard enduro or slow style riding in general because they're high compression four strokes. They need a lot of airflow to stay cool. And I know that there are some bikes out there and some brands that make, more trail centric four strokes. And I'm not talking about the air cool ones. I'm talking about, your race four strokes. But without changing my bikes too much and putting bigger water pumps and fans and bigger radiators and all that on it, I just decided that I would start looking for a bike that I knew I could ride with her and not have overheating issues. So I started looking at two strokes, and obviously two strokes run cooler. They can run at fast pace, they can run at slow pace, and hard enduro is a really big sport right now. People really seem to like it. I like it. I like watching it. I love riding it. My wife, it's her favorite kind of riding. So I started looking at that style of bike. So I'm not going to talk about every brand, but, and it may seem like I'm rambling on, but I feel like it's important to talk about the different bikes I was looking at, because I feel like everybody that's in this market is going to be looking at these similar bikes. I'm not going to talk about Sherco and so much Beta, although Beta makes the X Trainer. So if you're in the market for a trail two-stroke or a hard enduro two-stroke, that might be one you really want to consider. But I'm not going to talk so much about those bikes. I'm going to talk about the three bikes at first. The three bikes that I was looking at when I was in the market to buy the bike. And then I'll talk about why I chose the Yamaha. So the three bikes I was looking at was the KTM XTW 250 or 300, the Husqvarna TE 250 or 300, and the Yamaha YZ250X. So it came down to those three bikes. And obviously, we know the capabilities in slow technical hard terrain or hard enduro of the KTM and the Husqvarna. Those are proven bikes. I mean, anybody that watches the sport or reads about the sport will know that Manny Lettenbichler and Billy Bolt both ride those brands. And if you look at their capabilities, essentially that entire bike is designed around hard enduro. So we know that those bikes can go slow, and we know that they can lug around, and we know they won't overheat, as well as people race them in sprint enduro, and people race them in GNCC, and people race them in super enduro, if you know what all those things are. Or if you don't, and you don't race at all, essentially they can lug up hills. You can ride them slow. You can ride them doing technical trails, or you can ride them at fast pace. And so those bikes are proven. So the Yamaha was not proven. The Yamaha YZ250X is pretty much the Yamaha YZ250 that was designed around the 2006 YZ250, which was later updated in 2022. And the YZ250X is essentially almost the same bike. Obviously, it has an 18-inch wheel. The pipe in the front is tucked in a little bit more, so it is a little bit more protected. The gearing is different, and the suspension is softer. But in terms of, I would say, a proven hard enduro bike, it doesn't have that reputation. So if you're in the market and you're a Yamaha guy, or you're just in the market for that kind of bike, you may be wondering, like I was wondering, is this bike capable of doing that? Or is it just essentially a race YZ250 that's been renamed and it's just got a few different things? Because even though two-strokes in general run cooler, there are some issues if you don't convert a race two-stroke over into like a more wood slow-style two-stroke. There's some issues you're going to have. Fouling plugs is a big one. Finding the right mixture, and whether it's within the carburetor with the air-fuel mixture or your gas ratio to oil ratio. You may have a lot of splooge come out of the pipe. So these are things that can happen. And it's not something you really want to worry about. You do, when you buy a bike for a specific thing, you kind of want it to be able to perform out of the gate without having to change too much about it. We have that luxury now. This is not the 90s or early 2000s where you basically don't have that many options. We have a ton of options. And if you're an older person or a younger person and you're either upgrading into a new bike, or you're coming off a trail bike, or maybe you want to dabble in a different kind of sport like hard enduro or GNCC, and you're a motocross guy, you're all wondering these same things. And so I'm going to dive into why I chose this over those other bikes. So one of the biggest reasons was A, the availability of this bike, and B, the price. So the availability in this area, I'm in the North Carolina area, around the Raleigh area / Charlotte. The Yamaha seemed to be a lot more available. The Husqvarna was probably the toughest bike to find in terms of availability, especially at a price that was reasonable. KTM was a lot more available, but at the end of the day, it's a very expensive bike. The XCW 300 or the 250 is a pretty expensive bike. You're looking at over $10,000. And if you're looking at the 300 hard enduro version, it's even bigger chunk of change. So that was the two things that was really hard for me to decide on when it came to buying the bike it's really hard to get this bike, and I'm looking at a lot of money. So I started looking at the Yamaha. I've had Yamahas in the past. I've had two. I've had a YZ 450F and a YZ 250F, and both were really great bikes. And I've been on Japanese bikes my whole life. I come from a background of Kawasaki's, all the way from KLX 110 as my first bike when I was 8, to a KX60 back when they made those, to a KX65, then to a KX85, then onto a Honda CR 250F, then a YZ 450F, then I went back to a 250, Yamaha YZ 250, And then I ended up getting the 2013 Kawasaki and then another Kawasaki. So my whole life, I've been on Japanese bikes. From brand to brand, there are some differences, but in terms of maintenance and how they ride, there is obviously some differences, but compared to a Japanese bike to an Austrian bike, there's a pretty big difference. Obviously, if we're talking about the two-stroke side of things, those are TBI now. I think the KTM and the Husqvarna are TBI, if I'm not mistaken, throttle body injected. I'm pretty sure they also have oil injectors on them, so you don't mix your gas. There's hydraulic clutch. They do put the bigger flywheel, so the vibration's lower. Not that I noticed that, but in general, there's a pretty big difference. Air fork. So if you're coming off of a Japanese brand that you've been on most of your life, then the YZ is going to look like a more familiar option. So now let's talk about, okay, why the Yamaha? I know the price that's cheaper, availability, I mentioned that. So let's talk about the differences if you're looking in the market. It's because maybe those two things don't apply to you. So the differences, as I mentioned, is with the KTM, you're looking at the oil injector, you're looking at throttle body injected or fuel injected. So you don't mix your gas, you don't have a carburetor, and you have a hydraulic clutch. So those are the three biggest differences. And then the last being the electric start. Obviously, that's a big deal these days. So with that being said, why did I choose the Yamaha with all those other options? Because a lot of the time, people give this bike flack for it being outdated and not keeping up with the times, and they're saying it doesn't have a lot to offer. And this is also something I was concerned about myself when I was in the market, and I was like, it does seem like it is outdated. But if you want to see its capabilities, then I have, obviously, this video is showing you that it can ride MX, it can ride slow trails, it can ride fast sprint enduro style stuff. So it's marketed as a cross-country bike, but it can ride slow. And that's the biggest question I had about this bike is, could it ride slow? Could it ride hard enduro? We know the other bike brands can. That's what they're centered around. But could this bike do it? Or was it too close to an MX bike? Would it foul plugs or overheat or have some of these issues? The answer is it won't. It will not overheat. It will not foul plugs. I run it 32-1, as the manual says. I do not mess with the carburetor. Obviously, if you're in higher altitudes, or you're seeing a lot of elevation change because you're in a state or a country where you have a lot of mountains and you're going to see that higher elevation change, then yeah, a carburetor might be a pain for you. And I'm not going to get into the electron carb and the smart carb stuff, but I run stock carburetor. I have run this bike now in the slow woods with my wife for several months now, and I have not fouled a plug. I have not noticed too much splooge coming out, which, if any of you that have a two-stroke know that's essentially when oil doesn't burn off as much and you have oil coming out of your pipe. So if you are coming off motocross, or maybe you're wanting to buy a bike to ride with your son or your wife or your daughter, or whoever, or your friends, and you're a beginner rider, or you're going to ride slow, you're going to ride hard enduro, this bike is more than capable of doing that. Okay? It will do that very well. And I am very pleased with its lugability and its hard enduro capabilities, because that's the question that no one really answers. Yes, there's videos. A great person to go watch on YouTube is the channel In No Way Famous. He's a really good hard enduro rider. I'm not that good of a hard enduro rider. I'm a motocross guy. I'm a sprint enduro guy. Sprint enduro is my main focus, and then GNCC. I don't ride hard enduro, but I want to branch out and I want to learn. And my wife loves watching hard enduro, riding hard enduro. She lives and breathes it. So it's a new chapter in my life, and part of the reason I bought this bike. But nobody could really answer, could it ride slow? And the answer is yes. It can ride. You can lug it all day, ride it slow all day in the woods. And at least for me, I've not had any of the issues that I've heard people having with other types of two-strokes. This is obviously non-trail style two-strokes. Because cross-country bikes, I mean, Kawasaki KX250X is a cross-country bike. And it's essentially just a race four-stroke made for GNCC and Sprint Enduro. That bike's not really going to lug around the woods very readily without overheating. I just don't see how it's going to... I know there's people out there that do modify their bikes to do that, but it's not made for that. So that was my fear with the YZ250X version was, okay, is it just an MX bike that they just put a cross-country styling to it with the 18-inch rear wheel and the just different gearing and the softer suspension? Is it still just an MX bike? And the answer is no. I think it's completely separate from the MX bike. This bike actually hardly does MX very well. I think one of the biggest things you'll notice people saying, and this I'm going to say it, is the suspension is definitely made for the woods. I think the gearing is made for lugging around. Yes, it's just as fast. I think at the top speed, it's even faster than the MX bike because of the way the gearing is, but it can lug around. First and second and third are different from the MX bike, and fourth and fifth are really long. So it has the luggability of a hard enduro style bike. I think Yamaha did something special with this bike, being that the price that it is, and it can do so many things so well. I mean, as someone who rides motocross, I typically like my suspension super stiff. And if you notice in the video when I was riding on the track, the rollers or whoops, it's really tough to ride this bike because you basically G out and it gets kind of squirrely. So, and you don't want to over jumps because the suspension is really soft, but the thing can ride motocross. And I think that's the point and one of the biggest things I can say about it is even though it's platformed around a motocross bike and it can ride motocross, it is not a motocross bike. You could stiffen the suspension up, you change some settings, and essentially I feel like you could really race motocross, race sprint enduro, race GNCC, and then soften it back up on the weekend or another weekend and go ride hard enduro. I mean, it just does everything I was hoping it would do. And that's ultimately the question I had was, will it do that? And that's the answer, is yes, it will. If you're somebody who's not familiar with this bike and you want to know the question, hopefully this video finds you, yes, it can do that. Yes, it can ride slow. Yes, you can ride it with your kids. Yes, you can ride it with your friends slowly. Yes, you can learn hard enduro on it. Yes, it's perfect for trail riding and lugging around all day. And then the next day or next weekend, going and riding motocross. And then the following weekend, going and racing GNCC. It can do all those things. It is an amazing bike. Yamaha, a lot of people just say it's an outdated YZ250 cross-country version, and it doesn't have a lot to offer. But I don't know if Yamaha essentially made it for hard enduro, but I feel like it's the only Japanese hard enduro bike that I would recommend for anybody, and it's the only Japanese two-stroke left. And so I don't think that was originally their design, but I think with people wanting to ride woods, wanting to ride slow, and I think that style of riding getting more and more popular, this bike is a serious contender. And yeah, I don't have electric start, and I don't have all the bells and whistles of the Austrian bike or the French bikes or Spanish bikes, but I'm a 90s kid, and essentially this bike feels like a 90s hard enduro bike, or enduro bike in general. And it basically could take you everywhere. It's an amazing bike. Whether you're riding really slow through some technical trails or you're riding fast in the desert, it does so many things well, and it really performs a lot better than I expected it to. And I hope that if you do consider, if you are considering getting a new bike, you'll definitely look at this bike if you're in the capacity for a trail style bike, because it has a lot to offer. And another great thing is the reliability and cost of the Japanese bike. I feel like they are cheaper. But, I think the only thing you're really going to notice if you're coming off an electric start bike, then yeah, kickstarting it. And there's situations where, it's stalled, or, I've been in a tight spot where the Kickstarter is kind of a pain, but I've never thought, you know what, I really wish I had an electric start. I mean, maybe it's just because I am old enough to remember, I mean, my 2013's Kickstart. So I grew up with a Kickstarter. I don't feel like it's a disadvantage. And I don't know, something about it also reminds me of the old days. And so this bike you will not be disappointed. It will bring smiles all day. And I feel like as a competitor to the Austrian brands, with all their bells and whistles and everything they have to offer, this is every bit as good as those bikes. It really is. And it is more than capable of doing anything you expect it to do. And I think that everyone I know that has them really enjoys this bike and has nothing but good things to say about it. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd buy another one. So hopefully that answers some questions, and I hope you enjoy the video. I know I've been rambling on this whole time, but I just wanted to talk about the bike and how good it is, and I hope that this helps with any of the questions you were wondering. So thanks for tuning in, and until next time. On a side note, I have some videos coming up with all the different bikes. I'm going to continue making videos with this bike. I'll do slow technical riding with my wife videos, MX videos, sprint enduro videos, and as well as I'm going to do race videos with the other bikes and MX stuff with the other bikes. So there's a ton of things, ton of content coming soon. I know this channel doesn't have much to it, but I felt like I would talk a little bit about this bike, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time.